Despite his vast wealth, he remained clueless about connecting with his own child until a gentle housekeeper transformed their world. Tears weren't part of his plan that day. Not standing there in his home's corridor at 2 p.m., clutching a partially empty bourbon glass, without shoes, still dressed in yesterday's crumpled shirt. Yet there stood Grayson Blackwell, a man wealthy enough to acquire half the tech companies in Silicon Valley, witnessing a moment so peaceful and genuine that it shattered something within him he'd forgotten existed. But let's rewind to the beginning. 2 months prior, Grayson had abandoned San Francisco completely. He'd fled the cold marble surfaces, the meaningless corporate gatherings, and a marriage that had crumbled publicly like a structure everyone could see was doomed. News outlets splashed his personal life across headlines. Technology mogul's divorce turns ugly. Rather than stay to manage the aftermath, he chose to disappear. He secured his son in Suv's back seat and vanished into the Oregon hills near Ashland, seeking refuge in a place of winding roads, towering pines, and endless horizons. His purchase was an aging mansion from the 1930s, a sprawling 20-room structure with wilderness stretching beyond its borders, which he filled with quietude. While Grayson convinced himself he needed time for reflection, his true need was for concealment. Caleb, his 8-year-old son, had always been unique. Following his autism diagnosis at 4, he displayed intelligence but remained largely nonverbal, with strong sensitivities to sound and physical contact. Grayson harbored no resentment about this, yet he felt perpetually lost about how to respond. His approach to challenges involved hiring professionals, therapists, educators, behavior specialists, an entire team of experts armed with documentation, analysis, and structured plans. Despite this, Caleb continued to recoil when people approached too quickly, continued his rocking motions under harsh lighting, and maintained his avoidance of eye contact. Grayson wasn't unkind, merely distant. While physically present in their home, emotionally he'd been unreachable for years. Their house remained frigid, not temperature-wise, as the fireplace operated on schedule, but in the way that made the walls seem perpetually listening yet never responding. Caleb occupied his time in the sunroom, constructing towers from tiny blocks. Grayson would occasionally pause to observe but never initiated conversation. What words could he possibly offer? On a Tuesday morning, the agency contacted him. Their previous housekeeper had resigned, claiming the atmosphere felt oppressive. They had a replacement ready. The woman on the phone explained. Her name is Naomi. She's local. Her background check came back clean, and she's available to start right away. Grayson paid little attention. Fine, he replied. Send her over. She appeared the following day wearing a weathered denim jacket, canvas shoes, and hair pulled back in a ponytail that suggested she'd fixed it while sitting in her truck. She defied his expectations. Perhaps in her mid-30s, with skin the color of rich coffee and a voice that was gentle without being fragile. Her gaze surveyed the house like someone familiar with such places but unimpressed by their monetary value. She spoke minimally, offering polite smiles and acknowledgement during introductions, then positioned her canvas bag near the laundry room as if ready to begin before receiving any directions. Grayson observed one significant detail. Caleb didn't flinch when she passed him in the hallway. This was unprecedented. Nevertheless, he dismissed it as unimportant. Over the following days, Naomi cleaned while wearing earbuds, humming softly to herself. Her music wasn't contemporary pop but ancient church hymns, spiritual songs long forgotten by most. These were melodies Grayson remembered his grandmother singing while preparing collard greens in Little Rock. He'd lost touch with those songs, but Naomi had preserved them. Their interactions remained minimal, polite thanks, quiet morning greetings. Naomi never imposed but remained observant. She noticed Caleb's color-coded block arrangements, his rapid blinking when the refrigerator's hum became too loud, and his subtle smile when she moved slowly near him. Grayson witnessed these moments too but felt paralyzed by uncertainty, so he remained inactive. Then the rain arrived, a solid week of downpour that saturated the trees and transformed the driveway into mud. On day 5, Grayson wandered barefoot through the hallway with his bourbon glass, searching for a phone charger. That's when he detected it, not just singing, but a voice, tender, ancient, emanating from somewhere deep within. It was Naomi in the sunroom. He approached silently, careful not to disturb the moment or even breathe too audibly. There on the woven rug beside the window sat his son, nestled against Naomi's side, eyes closed, breathing steadily. For the first time in his life, Caleb appeared more than just calm. He looked secure. Grayson found himself frozen, speechless. Then, involuntarily, he released a sound. Not quite a sob, just something fractured. Naomi glanced up and met his gaze. She offered no smile, showed no alarm. She simply placed her hand gently on Caleb's back and continued humming. That day marked a shift, and Grayson could no longer pretend otherwise. The rainfall continued for 3 additional days. Grayson remained mostly confined to his study, door sealed, blind partially drawn, pretending to examine documents that had lost their importance months ago. Occasionally, he'd peer through the window at the swaying trees, their branches weeping like mourners for someone else's loss. But his thoughts kept returning to the sunroom scene. He avoided discussing it. Not with Naomi, not with Caleb, and certainly not with himself. Yet it lingered in his mind like a melody with forgotten lyrics that refuses to fade. Naomi proceeded with her duties as if nothing had occurred. She swept floors, cleaned baseboards, and folded towels in the hallway closet while humming those same slow gospel melodies, as if keeping rhythm with the house itself. She neither hovered around Caleb nor avoided him. Instead, she moved near him in meaningful small ways, placing a folded blanket on his preferred couch spot, positioning his favorite blue cup forward on the table before his arrival, preparing grilled cheese without asking his preference. He noticed. Grayson could tell. Though Caleb remained silent, his eyes tracked her movements in a way they never followed anyone else. One evening, as Naomi vacuumed the den, Caleb entered barefoot, carefully carrying one of his block towers with both hands. Typically, the vacuum's noise would have triggered a breakdown. He'd cover his ears, rock frantically, or hide beneath furniture. This time, however, he simply stood watching. Naomi paused and looked at him. "You okay, baby?" she asked gently, switching off the machine. Caleb blinked, then nodded once. Grayson observed from the hallway corner, swallowing hard. That simple nod, so small yet significant, hit him like a physical blow. He realized Naomi had never spoken to his son as if he were damaged. She didn't slow her speech or raise her pitch as if addressing an infant. She simply spoke, calmly, respectfully, warmly. This realization prompted Grayson to pay closer attention. He began lingering longer in the kitchen when she was present, asking questions he typically delegated to staff. "Did you have siblings growing up? Or how long have you called Oregon home?" Naomi's responses were consistently brief but never cold. "Born in Mississippi, relocated here when my sister fell ill." "Is your sister well now?" "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." She simply shrugged softly and returned to washing dishes. That was Naomi's way. She didn't seek sympathy or act as if the world owed her anything. She simply continued forward. Somehow, without intention, Grayson began decelerating around her. He stopped checking emails before bed and actually began sitting at the dinner table instead of eating from his lap in the study. Caleb started joining him there. No conversation, no physical contact, just presence. Somehow, that sufficed. One afternoon, Grayson discovered Naomi in the laundry room folding towels. A basket of Caleb's clothing sat nearby. Mismatched socks, shirt still warm from the dryer. "You used to work with children?" he inquired. She looked up from the basket. "No, never did. But you seem to understand him somehow." "I pay attention." He leaned against the doorframe. "Most people don't." She remained silent for a while, continuing to fold towels. Then she spoke, eyes still focused on the basket. "People like Caleb feel everything intensely. That's what most folks miss. They can't filter stimuli the way we do. So when you raise your voice, slam a door, or even sigh too heavily, it's like a fire alarm screaming in their head." Grayson remained quiet because her words rang true. Naomi continued, "He doesn't need perfection. He just needs genuine presence." He looked down, ashamed. "I'm not skilled at that." Naomi finally met his eyes. then learn. But Grayson hadn't mastered anything in years that didn't involve programming, contracts, or capital. This lesson required more than money. 3 weeks in, Naomi had already transformed the house's atmosphere in the most positive way, not through noise, chaos, or drama, but through quiet reliability. Her presence didn't demand attention, yet changed everything, like sunlight warming a room without permission. Grayson began noticing subtle transformations. The kitchen no longer smelled of sterile surfaces and unused appliances, but of cinnamon toast and leftover gumbo. The living room, once resembling a museum display rather than a place of comfort, now had slightly displaced pillows, a fleece throw casually draped over the couch arm, and Caleb's blocks arranged in neat rows across the rug. Naomi didn't seek permission for these changes. She simply identified needs and addressed them. One afternoon, Grayson found her outside in the garden, kneeling in the soil beside the back patio. She was removing weeds, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with earth. Caleb sat cross-legged on the grass nearby, silently observing. "You don't need to do that, you know," Grayson said, stepping onto the porch. Naomi didn't look up. "I know it's not in my job description. Neither is teaching your son to plant basil. But here we are." Grayson blinked. "Is helping?" Naomi smiled slightly. "Watching is helping right now." He stepped onto the grass, squinting in the late afternoon sunlight. "You've always enjoyed gardening." She sat back on her heels. "Where I come from, gardens weren't recreational. They were essential for food. We didn't call it therapy, we called it survival." Grayson nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. After a lengthy pause, she stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. "But yes, I enjoy gardens." That was her communication style. Straightforward, honest, without performance. She didn't need to impress, just to be present. Later that evening, as Naomi rinsed dishes, Grayson lingered nearby. "Why did you accept this position?" he asked. Naomi didn't pause her scrubbing. "Because it paid fairly. That's all." She glanced at him. "Why? Were you expecting me to claim I had a calling?" He chuckled. "No, I just..." She set the plate in the rack and turned to face him. "Look, Mr. Blackwell, I've cleaned homes for people with nothing and people with excess. Wealth doesn't impress me. But when I arrived here and saw that boy sitting on the floor with no toys, just rocking because the world felt too overwhelming, I didn't see a paycheck. I saw a child who needed someone to sit quietly with him." Grayson remained silent, looking away. "I'm not attempting to play savior," she added. "Sometimes being the calm person in the room is the most important thing a child requires." He exhaled slowly. "You're correct. I don't know how to connect with him." Naomi softened. "Start by sitting." "Sitting?" "Yes. Not talking, not fixing, just sitting. Let him see you without the business attire, without the phone, without the agenda." Grayson nodded slowly. That night, after Naomi left the room, he went to the sunroom where Caleb was arranging puzzle pieces edge to edge, organizing all the blue pieces first. Grayson said nothing and didn't attempt to help. He simply sat today. Initially, Caleb showed no reaction, but after a minute, the boy shifted slightly and moved an inch closer. Grayson remained still, barely daring to breathe. Caleb reached into the puzzle box, retrieved a green piece, and placed it gently beside his father. It wasn't verbal communication, but it was something. The next morning, Naomi found Grayson at the kitchen table with a coffee cup already poured for her. "I remembered you prefer it black," he said. She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Look at you, paying attention." He grinned. "I'm trying." Naomi accepted the mug, nodding her gratitude, and sat across from him. They didn't converse much, just sipped and watched the clouds shift outside. But the silence between them no longer felt empty. It was beginning to feel like the foundation of something new. Thursday began like most days. Overcast sky, gently swaying trees, and Naomi humming Wade in the water while folding hand towels. Grayson had taken a morning call from his attorney about another delay in the divorce proceedings, but he wasn't really listening. His eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, toward Caleb's room. He hadn't spoken to his ex-wife in over a month. Their last conversation had been brief and harsh, accusations disguised as parenting concerns. She called Caleb a burden, then blamed Grayson for not fixing him. He didn't defend himself, just ended the call and stayed at the wall. Naomi must have sensed his shifted energy that morning. She didn't probe or ask questions, but she brewed fresh coffee and slid the sugar closer without saying a word. Around noon, music drifted from the sunroom, not loud, but rhythmic. Clapping, stomping, an old spiritual she must have found online. This little light of mine, sung by raw voices as if recorded in a rural church without microphones. Grayson followed the sound, and what he witnessed made him freeze. Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor with Caleb in front of her, mirroring her position, eyes wide, hands on his lap. She clapped gently, paused, then clapped again, establishing a rhythm. "Your turn," she whispered. Caleb blinked, hesitated, then slowly, awkwardly clapped twice. She smiled. "Yes, exactly like that. Again." He clapped once more. "And I told you I don't care what your new maid thinks. Her name is Naomi." A pause. "You have a maid making decisions about our child." Grayson's voice dropped. "She's done more for him in a month than you've done in 3 years. You're losing your mind. You're delusional, Grayson. You don't even know that woman." He didn't respond. He simply hung up. The silence that followed was dense, heavy. He sat at his desk, heart racing, jaw clenched. Who was he really? A father? A failure? A man hiding behind screens and bank accounts, allowing a woman he barely knew to repair the parts of his life he couldn't confront? He stormed from the study and found Naomi in the kitchen, wiping the counter. "She thinks you're manipulating me," he said flatly. Naomi turned slowly. "Who does?" "My ex-wife." "She called you?" Grayson nodded. "Said I don't know you. That you're some stranger playing house." Naomi set down the rag. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm a stranger. You never asked much about me." Grayson blinked. "I didn't mean it that way." She stepped back slightly. "Maybe you didn't. But she's not wrong. You don't know my story. You don't even know what I've lost. I know you care about him." "Yes, I do. But if this is about your ego or guilt or repairing something you damaged, don't place that burden on me." Her voice wasn't angry, but it was firm. She continued, "I accepted this job to clean, to help, to maybe bring some peace where there wasn't any. But I won't be your Band-Aid, Grayson. I'm not here to be your emotional rehabilitation." Grayson stood frozen, then nodded slowly. "You're right." Naomi looked at him steadily. "So what are you going to do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and left the room. Naomi exhaled and leaned against the counter. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't planned to care this deeply, hadn't planned to build something real in a house that wasn't hers. But Caleb was no longer just a job. He was a child she'd grown to love, and that frightened her. That night, Naomi packed a small bag, just in case. She didn't want to leave, but she needed to be prepared. The next morning, she found Caleb sitting by the kitchen door, fully dressed, shoes on the wrong feet, holding his toy train. "Where are you headed?" she asked gently. He didn't speak, just pointed toward the door. She crouched beside him. "You want to go outside?" He nodded once. She opened the door and let him step onto the porch. Grayson was already there, sitting on the steps with messy hair and red eyes. Naomi froze in the doorway. Caleb walked up beside his father. Didn't sit, just placed the train gently in Grayson's lap. Grayson looked down at it, then up at Naomi. "I'm sorry for expecting you to repair things I broke." Naomi said nothing. He continued, "I want to improve. Not just for Caleb, for myself, for whatever this is between us." She crossed her arms. "And what is this?" "I don't know yet, but I know it's real, and I'm not going to flee from it." Naomi stared at him for a long time. Then she stepped outside, sat beside him, and looked out over the trees. Caleb sat on her other side and rested his head lightly on her shoulder. They remained like that for a while. No one moved. But healing doesn't occur all at once. It begins with one choice to remain. By the time spring reached Ashland, the house's rhythm had completely transformed. It wasn't perfect or always easy, but it was authentic. Grayson began doing more than just being present. He started engaging, folding laundry, sitting with Caleb during his sensory breaks, asking Naomi questions not out of politeness but from genuine curiosity. He learned that she'd sung in a church choir before her sister's illness, that she'd once aspired to be a teacher, that she'd never had children of her own, not from lack of desire, but because life intervened. Naomi learned in return that Grayson's father had left when he was 10, that his mother had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, that somewhere along the way, he decided success would prevent him from ever feeling powerless again. But success doesn't alter the past, and money doesn't teach love. Caleb continued progressing, small, subtle improvements. He still rarely spoke, but he began reaching for connection, sitting closer, placing objects gently in Grayson's hands, brushing his fingers along Naomi's arm when she passed just to confirm a presence. One night after dinner, Caleb brought his puzzle to the table. He didn't hand it to Naomi or Grayson. He sat between them, opened the box, and patted the table with his small hand. An invitation. Grayson and Naomi sat without questions or instructions. They simply helped. Together, they built the edges, then slowly worked inward. Piece by piece, the picture emerged, not quickly, not perfectly, but together. Later that week, Naomi received a call. A job offer from a nearby child development center. Higher pay, benefits, a chance for meaningful full-time work. She contemplated it for a long time without immediately bringing it up. That evening, Grayson found her in the sunroom, sitting in Caleb's usual spot. "You're quiet," he said, entering. She held up her phone. "Got offered a job. A real one." His jaw tightened slightly. "Oh, I haven't accepted yet." He nodded slowly. "Do you want it?" Naomi looked out the window. "I want to help children. I always have." Grayson stepped closer. "You already do." She looked up at him. "This house isn't mine, Grayson. You and Caleb, you're not mine." Grayson knelt beside her. "Maybe not by blood, but what we've built here, this isn't just work. This is something sacred." Naomi didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, "I don't want to leave him." "You don't have to. I need to know you're not just relying on me because you don't want to do this alone." "I was initially," he admitted, "but not anymore. I want you beside us. Not in front, not behind. Beside." Naomi's eyes filled, but she held back the tears. "I've never been invited into something like this." "You're not being invited," Grayson said softly. "You're being chosen." Outside, they heard the screen door creak open. Caleb walked in quietly, barefoot, holding one of his drawings, a simple crayon sketch of 3 stick figures under a blue scribbled sky. One tall figure, one in the middle, and one smaller, holding both hands. He handed it to Naomi. She stared at it for a long time, then turned to Grayson. "I'll stay, but only if we all keep building this together." He smiled. "Deal." From that point forward, things weren't perfect. There were still challenging days, still silence, still the slow process of unlearning old patterns. But they had each other. Naomi declined the job offer. Instead, she helped Grayson create a small learning space for Caleb in one of the back rooms. Soft lighting, sensory toys, and a garden bench just outside the window. Grayson took fewer meetings, fewer phone calls. He spent more mornings preparing breakfast and more evenings assembling puzzles with no intention of winning. And Caleb grew. He didn't need fixing, just understanding. He didn't need therapy to replace connection. He just needed love that endured. And now he had it. Because sometimes the most unexpected people enter your life not to change it, but to help you become who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt like you were failing those you love, remember it's never too late to appear, to stay, to try, to be present. And if someone offers you grace, accept it. Now tell me, who has been your Naomi? Who have you been that for?